Welcome to the event show live. Thank you to those that are joining us again. Appreciate your support, and thank you to those that are joining us for the first time. It's great to have you in this forum. The purpose of the event show sessions really is to give a voice to our industry, to bring us together during what's a challenging time, but also looking ahead at what some of the future opportunities are, and I guess how we can all be adapting in the situation we find ourselves in. So we've been hearing from some great people across the industry, some influential leaders, and hopefully giving you some ideas and insights to walk away with and use in your work. My name's Andrew O'Loughlin. For those of you who haven't tuned in before, I basically help people design event experiences and help them, I guess, rebuild their events and programs at the moment. Also help people navigate their way through our event industry, which even at the best of times can be quite challenging. It can be inspiring, but as we know, there's two sides to that industry. So this forum is about bringing us together and sharing some of the knowledge and experience that we all have. I'll jump into our panel very shortly. We've got a great group of guys joining us today. I will call out, as I do each week, if you'd like to drop any questions in the Q&A box, or feel free to chat away in the chat box. It's really good for us to hear of any questions you have, obviously, and hear what's on your mind as we go through the show. So we'll get to those questions as you put them out there. But we'll jump into the show. So introducing our panel, we're joined today by Sean Callanan. Sean is the founder of Sports Geek and SG Sports. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to be here.
Great to have you on the show. Also joining us is Jeremy Francis. Jeremy is COO of MKTG, the agency. Welcome, Jezza.
Thanks, Andy. Morning.
And also joining us is Andy van Bergen, who is, amongst other things, the founder of Everesting, a fantastic success story in our industry, Hell's 500, and in his day job manages the membership and events program at CyclingTips. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks so much for having me on AOL.
Great to have you all on today. So we're going to obviously work our way through the panel. I'm going to go to Sean first. Sean, you've been, I guess, a great voice for the industry, for the sporting industry, and have been leading the way, I guess, for a number of years in terms of these types of forums, and been podcasting and webcasting for a number of years. So I was really keen to get your thoughts, I guess, on what you're seeing emerge at the moment. If you can give us a bit of a rundown, I guess, of what Sports Geek's all about for those that aren't familiar with it, but also where you're spending your time and your thinking at the moment.
Yeah, happy to. So I started Sports Geek 11 years ago now. Before Sports Geek, I was just a regular geek, coder developer for many years, but saw there was an opportunity to help the sports world better understand the world of digital. And so early on, I was helping teams and leagues and brands understand digital, especially the social media platforms, and that's evolved into helping build out digital teams, create content, leverage these platforms, sell tickets. When we used to be able to get people to events and stadiums, when we used to be able to worry about getting the cheeks and the seats. And then the last piece is how we go about commercializing it. And so, like everyone, when sports stopped, there was a WTF moment of what do we do next, and what does it look like? And we're sort of seeing the ebb and flow. So when sports stopped, depending on where you were, like the AFL and NRL clubs just starting, like they were like, how are we going to get through this season? And so they had that period of how do we talk to our sponsors? How do we talk to our fans? Very much leveraging all their digital platforms. And now as they're starting to come back in some instances, we're seeing AFL, NRL come back. We're seeing netball coming back soon. And then we're also seeing the summer sports starting to plan what it might look like post-pandemic. Hopefully we can get to this sort of place that's post-pandemic. How they go about engaging their fans. And then also things like, how do we start getting back into stadiums? So sports is a pretty resilient business, and pretty adaptable, and I think this is shown that. So it's it's been really taking what you've got, whether it's, access to players when you didn't have them when they were isolated, to now they're in a bubble. How do you cover a sport in that scenario? How do you develop content and produce content in a distributed team? Like, everyone's working from home. So there's a lot of learning, and I think there's been a lot of sharing across the industry, in things like Zoom calls and the like. So yeah, it's sort of been, now that we're getting to the point of, sports coming back, we're trying to figure out, what our role is in that. So we're advising clubs and leagues on how they can best manage with the fan. Like, we've been trying to talk to the digital fan and telling everyone to talk to the digital fan for 11 years, right? 98% of the fans aren't in the stadiums, and it's a little bit, the light bulb's gone off. We've got to talk to all of them. And so it's really, a lot of teams and leagues are leveraging their digital platforms really hard to have that connection with fans, and try to figure out what, the world's going to look like the next 6 to 12 months.
Mm. Yeah, look, and it's fascinating, isn't it? I guess the phase we're going through, it's certainly challenging, and we're looking for different ways of communicating. What I guess, from your learnings and over recent years, but particularly in recent months, what are the things that we should be doing to connect with our audiences on those platforms?
I think the main thing is to continue to make fans feel like they're part of the story and helping them connect. Because normally it's all about driving people to come to the game or feel like they're part of the tribe, right? And I think, in Australia, we do the tribal thing really well. And what I talk about with digital is the face paint, right? So give them the digital content that they can share and say that they're being part of it, whether it's participating in the conversation or dressing up while the games are on, so they feel part of it and they're going to be welcomed back. Like, that's pretty much what digital teams and leagues are, charged with now, whether they're, an AFL team, an NRL team, or, the NBA team's about to go back into the bubble. How do they make the fans feel like they're there? And giving them enough digital content so those fans continue putting their hand up and say, I'm still a Collingwood fan, I'm still a Lakers fan. And when you open the doors, like we've seen, with our friends in WA and Queensland, I do want to come back. So it's, priming the fans to welcome them back, some point down the path.
Mm, absolutely. No, it's good advice. And obviously there's many different ways of doing that. And I'll definitely come back to you to sort of explore some of the ideas and some of the things which are occurring and working.
Yep.
I'll bring Jeremy into the conversation now. Jeremy, you COO at MKTG, a leading global agency. Really just interested in hearing a bit about what MKTG's been focused on in the past couple of months, and how you're, I guess, changing your offering or adapting to the environment that we're working in and the types of experiences that you and your team are providing.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So look, MKTG is really an agency focused on building, world-class experiences and brand partnerships. And so with that in mind, we work really closely with some of the tier 1 sports organisations in Australia and around the world. But in Australia specifically, we work with, the AFL, Cricket Australia, the FFA, VRC, so a lot of fairly big rights holders in the country, and then we basically sell and deliver advertising solutions in partnership with those guys, mostly in stadium, but also in digital as well. And then we've also got a full service, if you like, a full service marketing agency. So our marketing services function is largely sports and culture focused. So we've got strategy, creative, a consulting team that works on, leveraging brand partnerships or making sure they get the strategy right. And then we've got a retail activations team and a brand experiences team. So a fairly as I said, full service, if you want to use those words, which get overused a little bit, but a fairly full service agency to support, the great network of brands that we work with and rights holders. I'd like to be able to say we're really single-minded in our focus, but the reality is at the moment in our industry, there's a fair bit of, to use all the words, being agile, pivoting, being resilient, all of those things. And we're absolutely focused on doing that. And I don't think that's necessarily a negative. So we're really clear on what we're working on, where we're trying to get to, but at the same time, we're being nimble and agile to support all of the partners that we work with. And it's absolutely overused. I couldn't agree with that anymore. But at the same time, it's a bit of a reality at the moment. So your question was sort of around what we're seeing. And I think it's really interesting that the thing that where we're seeing people have the most success is not forgetting the core reason to believe in sport and believe in brand experiences. And I think Sean talked about it really well there is, being part of the tribe and making sure that personalisation remains strong to drive relevance and engagement. And I think that's the thing that we're really focused on is meaningful connection. And we talk about that a lot is brand experiences and human connection is what everybody loves and what makes everyone tick. And so we're certainly seeing new technology develop, the advancement of, virtual conferencing, and there's a whole bunch that we could talk through. But ultimately what we're seeing is the people that still remain successful are the ones that don't lose the focus on making people feel special, making them feel relevant and having that really strong connection with them. So that when you say our focus, that's the core principle of what we're all about. And that probably hasn't really changed, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think it's an interesting call out hearing that from yourself, Jeremy, and that's the things we should keep front of mind. And I think a lot of us are looking at what we pivot to and different platforms and tactics and tools, and I think it's and there's some which are better than others, as we know. But I think that's it's a good call out, and it's interesting to hear that within your agency that's your focus. Are you seeing, a lot of our audience work across events naturally, that may be sport, activations, work with brands, a range of different genres of events. Are you seeing certain types of experiences being more predominant at the moment naturally? And I guess, how have you changed your offering to deal with that?
Yeah, we definitely are. I think as I've heard a few of your other guests on the show talk about, virtual conferencing is a big one, and that's not unique to us. That's the world at the moment, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But so we're doing quite a lot of that, and I might touch on that in a second. I think certainly I'd love to hear Sean talk a little bit more about what he's seen in the esports space, because I certainly have seen from a motorsports point of view and things where it's worked really well. I think it hasn't worked as well in some other industries for some pretty clear reasons. It's anyone who watches AFL at the moment will see that there's growth of virtual signage. So there's a lot more digital signage formats coming out. So there's definitely pockets of areas where we've seen technology really advance quite quickly. And I'm sure we're all sitting here on Zoom calls every day of the week. If you remember back to March when Zoom calls started, there was no virtual backgrounds. It was just, person talking at the camera, and then everyone's very quickly gone there. I think Zoom were the first ones to say you can have a virtual background. And then, now if you look at Teams, the latest development from Teams is you can actually, you can talk to people and it looks like they're in an auditorium. So everyone's sort of literally sitting in seats and stuff. So even just the basics of Zoom conferencing or video conferencing has advanced quite quickly. So we're certainly seeing a lot of that. I think what's really interesting is the people that I see doing virtual conferencing really well are doing exactly what we spoke about before, making sure that it stays personal, feeling intimate. Like we did an event, Cara Coachella, we did an event probably, I'd say to be 2 or 3 months ago, and we had, 4 presenters from, 4 countries in 4 presenters in 4 different countries. I think we had about 40 odd presenters. It was a sort of a 6-hour event. But the way that we managed to keep people engaged was being really intimate. So we had Manu cooking a steak in his own kitchen. So people felt like they were, in his house getting cooked for by Manu. We had Delta Goodrum, and she was sort of making sure she stayed relevant to the audience and things like that. And I think the things that worked really well when you're trying to do a virtual conference is making people still feel special and make them feel like they're part of it. As Sean spoke about before in the social media and digital world, it's pretty consistent from that point of view. I think the one thing people need to be really cognizant of is it's absolutely advanced technology, and that's brilliant. And it's advanced technology in many different areas, but I think it will settle. I'm not saying these things aren't here to stay, but the world will not be all about virtual conferencing moving forward. And I think it's important to remain true to the principles of what you stand for, continue to leverage those, and then absolutely use the technology and make the most of it. But it's not going to be here forever because people still value that personal connection. So I think it's important to keep that balance right, because when this passes, some of the technology advancements will be here to stay, but some of them won't, in my opinion. And I think it's important not to use technology just for technology's sake, if that makes sense.
But I think if I can, like, some of it will be an extension of, like,
Yeah.
you know, like we'll go, you know, in hopefully maybe Melbourne Cup this year, you know, we'll still have the bird cage, but what we might have as a byproduct of it is a virtual extended bird cage that allows it be, you know, in a digital form that is a completely new product that would have been really hard to get up and running, you know, without this, you know, 3 months of innovation and change and use of that. So that's where I think the extension will come.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant point, Sean, because if you look at, like, everyone's trying to go direct to consumer now, and we work a lot in the retail space as well, and all the FMCG brands within reason, all of them are thinking about how do they make sure they stay relevant, and we've had a lot of good conversations about, you know, what is the role of an FMCG brand in going direct to consumer, and I think something that I observed Melbourne Racing Club do really well is their super boxes, which is, we know you're probably sitting at home watching the races now and you want to have that same experience. So Melbourne Racing Club have a brilliant, you know, really relevant pack to send to you, which includes, you know, all the stuff that you normally get, your beef sliders, your champagne, all of those sorts of things. And I thought that was a really good example of remaining true to that experience and being really specialised in what they were trying to deliver, and saying, you know, you can consume the races at home if you're not at the stadium. So it links to your point, and depending on where we get to with crowds in Melbourne, I'm not sure, will fashions on the field be a virtual event or a real event and things like that. But you know, I think there's good examples of people really remaining true to their principles and doing it in a really relevant way.
Fantastic, guys. Yeah, and I love the examples. I think, you know, that gives us some ideas about how this has been and how we can potentially.
We've lost you, Andrew.
We have.
I think led the way with some of the experiences and events and the evolution of those in recent times. So I'd love to hear a bit about Everesting, and obviously I'm familiar with it, but many may not be, and how that concept, I guess, was created and the journey you've been on over the last few years. But also during this phase, it certainly seems to have captured the imagination of many people around the world. So welcome, Andy. And can you give us a bit of a rundown of Everesting, what it is and how it came about?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Well, for those of you that aren't aware, Everesting is the very simple concept of riding a bike or running up and down the same hill until you climb the equivalent height of Mount Everest. It's one of those things that's well and truly entered the common cycling vernacular at the moment. It's part of the lexicon of cycling at the moment, and I think it's one of those things that you would probably call to borrow a term, it's a 7-year overnight success story. I think, you know, like Jeremy and Sean have kind of talked about, like we're really fortunate to have an amazing community behind us, and yeah, so over the years we've really seen a kind of a steady growth in this concept of Everesting. There's a website around it and a set of rules and everything like that. It's been talked about in the pro peloton, you know, during the Tour de France last year. A couple of pro riders, Richie Port and Cam Worth, as well as Jens Voigt, have all done Everestings in the past. So we knew it was a concept that was known about and talked about with a lot of people, and it was certainly for amateur athletes. It was a concept that was on a lot of people's bucket lists to tick off one day. But going into the forced isolation at the start of March around the world, all of a sudden it became something that, because we'd adopted a virtual arm of Everesting more than 5 years ago, there was no need for Everesting to pivot into a virtual arm or anything like that. It already existed. And so it meant that there were literally thousands of athletes around the world who had been training for Ironman or been training for Fondo events or running events or whatever it might be, that had this fitness and had a need for still having a goal and having a focus during this period of forced isolation, that we're able to just put that straight into Everesting. So yeah, we didn't see one single speed bump in terms of the amount of people that did it, but what we obviously saw was people doing virtual Everestings on a trainer overnight. And you know, previously a busy week for me, this is something that I do in my spare time. The busy week would be something around the, maybe 30 or 40 Everestings would come through, and that would equate to, an hour or two a night, most nights. And we went from that to around 1,200 Everestings a month, which is sort of what it's sort of picked up to. In addition to the amount of people that are doing it, it's the exciting thing is the pro riders that have picked it up as well. So, everyone from world champions like Mark Cavendish through to Lockie Morton and current pro riders who we know have heard about the concept, and when we talk to them, they're aware of it and have this desire to tick off this big chunky challenge. However, due to their training regimes and coaching regimes, they've never been allowed to. So they've all jumped on board, which has been really exciting. I've had so many messages from cycling media saying how pleased they are that there is something like Everesting at the moment, because it gives them something to report on while there is literally no racing anywhere in the world. And I guess, like that, and it's not just cycling media either, it is sort of transcending cycling a little bit. We had a piece picked up in the Wall Street Journal, of all things. The Telegraph over in the UK yesterday was talking about the fact that Alberto Contador, who just did an Everesting, sort of is on equal footing to an 11-year-old who does it on Zwift, a few weeks before. There's media outlets that are calling it, it's saying that it has the potential to be the marathon of running or the Ironman of triathlon, which is kind of exciting. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a brilliant concept, Andy, and I think you're underplaying some of the success and some of the profile that it's had. It's really caught people's imaginations. I love, it's a very simple concept in many respects, but very aspirational, and has become a bucket list thing to do. I think it seems to me that Everesting sort of a new way of developing events and experiences, which would be very well, world and in the future, and really that people.
That's it.
And you've used technology and.
A quote about
how you're in a good position for future growth with the type of.
Good luck with that one, Andy.
Yeah, I feel like I've been thrown under the bus just slightly with that question. I think Andrew, feel free to jump in if I got that wrong. Andrew, I just missed the crux of that question. Could you just repeat that?
Sorry, we seem to have cut out a little. Okay. It seems to me that Everesting is a concept very well positioned for. To facilitate and coordinate.
Do you want to type it in the chat?
Maybe.
I'm just going to jump in and piece together a response based on a couple of keywords there. So I think one of the things that's been that's really accelerated the growth of Everesting is very intentionally. When I created the concept a couple of years ago, I did that under the framework of a very sort of there's a core set of fundamental rules. So you pick one hill anywhere in the world, and there's been 97 countries that have been Everested now. And then you ride repeats of that hill until you climb the height of Mount Everest. But aside from that, and aside from some loose framework, I very intentionally created it in a way that people could be creative with the concept and could take it in different directions. And I think because of that flexibility within the framework, it means that it has really gained people's attention. It's not setting an hour record by riding repeats of a velodrome. In fact, the time is more or less irrelevant, even though there are pro riders currently racing it. The reality is it's been set up in such a way that it really encourages people to be creative with the concept, which means there are people doing this on brakeless track bikes, and people are doing double Everestings and triple Everestings and really discovering where the boundaries of kind of endurance climbing exists. There are people that are doing this on a unicycle, or it's crazy, but there's people who are doing a mono and riding the height of Everest for 20 hours, sort of thing. So it's really that flexibility that has enabled it to be successful, but also the fact that very intentionally, it's sort of a clear platform. So it means that, you know, we will have coverage on Red Bull the same week that we have coverage on Monster energy drinks, and you know, it can be picked up by different brands. So Specialized can talk about it in the same week that Giant do, and it really does, you know, give a free platform for people to talk about. I think the other thing that's been really interesting about it is, you know, we've always had different events being involved with Everesting, and helping those events being able to pivot during this period of lockdown and during the coronavirus has been really, really important. So, for example, there's one of the largest gravel grinding cycling events in the United States, Rebecca's Private Idaho, led by the Queen of Pain, Rebecca Rush, and we're able to help her pivot that event really quickly into a virtual Everesting event, which took place both in real life and online, depending on where you were around the world. And it saw a lot of success. She raised over $120,000 US, which is fantastic, and was able to mobilize hundreds of people within her community. The really exciting thing about that for Rebecca and for her team was they were able to see that, okay, well, not only were they no longer physically restricted by an event and having to deal with all the logistics and overheads that go into running a big you know, gravel grind in the United States, but all of a sudden she could tap into these markets which were fans of her brand but were located in Finland or France or Australia or New Zealand or wherever it was around the world, and all of a sudden she was able to mobilize this much wider community network that she had access to. So that's really exciting and encouraging.
That's brilliant, Andy. And look, I'll keep my questions short. You answered that one better than I could have asked it. But I'd love to know just a little bit more about your process, top line, if you like, about creating new events and experiences, because you've come up with a couple of gems a few times now. So what's your basic approach to that?
Yeah, I think, look, unfortunately, you mentioned before, my real job is with CyclingTips, and it's in membership, and I'm looking after a community there. You know, for the last dozen years, I've run Hell's 500, which is a cycling community. I've launched Everesting, which is a community. For a couple of years, we were running a series of free events called Domestique, which again is all about community. So I think, like, at the end of the day, it's connecting and creating communities is what I really love. Having community is incredible because it allows you to do things in a low resources way, which, you know, as you can imagine, because I'm doing this in my spare time, I need sort of that support network that comes from a community. And there's always this really fascinating sweet spot that happens with a transition of a community, and we're just experiencing it with CyclingTips community at the moment, and we sort of experienced that with Everesting a few years ago, and that's where it becomes sort of self-regulating and self-managing, but also excitingly, the community will take whatever your concept is if you guide it in the right way, and they'll turn it into things which is, you know, far bigger and greater than you could ever sort of expect or envision. So I think in answer to your question, it's a big part of my approach is finding a way that I can create things that have an element of sort of like open sandbox to it, which allow a community to take an idea or a concept and take it in different and new directions, but still being within the realms of the brand.
Absolutely, it's fascinating to see what you've created and hear a bit about how you're creating it. Jeremy, I'd just love to come back to you in terms of you've worked across different types of events and worked with different brands, but what are some of the things you think are really important to include in that experience, and both for your audience but also behind the scenes?
I think Andy's finished. I hope I'm not about to cut him off there because he's dropped out a little bit. But I think, and I've been fortunate enough to work with Andy a little bit before, so I think I loved hearing Andy talk about that because he is very, very strong at understanding that the heartbeat of a community and how that works. But I think from my point of view, I talked a little bit about it before. I think people, part of being part of a community is to be around like-minded people, but it's also to feel like you belong. And I think no matter what that tribe, Sean used the word tribe before, and I certainly believe in that word, and you can call it a tribe or a community or a membership or whatever it is. But I think the one thing that is really important is people want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like they're around a bunch of people that are like them and respect them for their values and their beliefs, and then they want to feel part of something bigger. And I think those principles, you could restructure those words in any way, but the theme of that is something that is really critical and really strong. You know, you go to the footy because you want to be around your mates, cheering for your team and feeling part of your team's success. And you know, you feel like the louder you cheer, the more successful your team is. Or, you know, you watch it at home and you're cheering into the screen. It's almost like you feel like you're egging your team on and you're helping them be part of that. And when you're on social media, you want to feel like you're part of a community that you're talking to of like-minded people. And I think the principles of that around, you know, being relevant, engaging and being personal is making them feel special. And it's funny because, you know, you get a medal at the end of a fun run, whether it be a 5K fun run, a 10K fun run, whatever it may well be. But the reality is a lot of people, that means something really, really special to them, and it'll sit on the back of your door, or it'll sit in your living room for a long time. Or you go to a pub after you've done a fun run, and if it's anywhere near the venue, everyone's sitting at the pub with their medal around their neck because they feel special and they feel like they've been part of something. And I think that's really, really important. Because people want to feel like they belong. And, you know, even in its simplest form is the Zoom fatigue thing, which everyone's really familiar with now, is one person talking at you for more than, I don't know, I've probably got a short attention span, but more than 20 or 30 minutes without a break or a change in something, or without throwing you is, the reality is people start to get a bit bored because they don't feel part of it. And I think that's a really important principle, whether you're talking about, you know, social media, how you keep an engagement in a conversation, whether you're talking about some of the great work that Andy does, or whether you're talking about watching the footy in a virtual format. It's about feeling like you belong and you're part of something. I think that's really critical. And then the only other thing I was going to say is, you know, as we see technology come in and grow, and if you use virtual signage as the example, because obviously that's a space that we're pretty familiar with, is now you can see that, you know, virtual signage is, if you think about some of the sports, is they'll offer you'll be looking at the same field, but depending on where you're watching that from, you'll see different advertising. So I wonder how long it will be before every individual is getting served personalised advertising. So, you know, at the moment, Andy, if you and I sit there and we're watching the footy or the cricket or whatever it may well be, we're going to see the same advertising. But what I think would be really interesting is how long will it be before how you consume sport is very different to the way that I might consume that same sport. And it'll start with advertising, but where will that go? So what will the difference be moving forward from that? Will you be able to choose your commentator? Will you be able to choose, you know, what you see at the halftime break, whatever it may well be? So at the moment, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg of how you consume sports. But I think what will be really interesting, and this will probably accelerate us there, this period that we're in now, is where you get to the point where you can almost choose your own adventure in sport from that point of view.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how baseball and basketball come back in the States.
Exactly.
You know, the NBA bubble has got LED screens all the way around it, which allow them to flip it out but, you know, make a virtual home game. And baseball's already been doing that, you know, changing the advertising in different geolocations. You know, you're running different ads when you're seeing in Japan. Yep. So it's not far from, you know, doing that when, you know, you sign up and you're watching it via KO and you're saying you're this type of fan. Well, why wouldn't you want to be seeing ads from that team or that for that market? So I think it's definitely going to happen.
Can you sort of extend on those ideas or trends which you're seeing emerge, Sean, in terms of both what the audience is experiencing, but also behind the scenes, how providers are evolving that approach?
Yeah, I mean, stuff that, you know, Jeremy was talking about, the virtual advertising, like, you know, the technology is way ahead of the law at the minute, right? Who has the rights to that? Like, I was talking to Greg Slay at Optus Stadium, and they're like, oh, cool, we can put these ads over where the crowd's going to be. And, like, you know, MKTG are like, oh, hang on, we've got those rights. And the stadium's going, no, we've got those rights. And the broadcast go, no, they're our rights. And because no one ever had rights to put ads on top of where the fans were. So there's been a lot of conversations around who has those rights and you know, getting the lawyers up to speed. has been interesting. But then the other part is, COVID's accelerated a whole bunch of tech that was potentially happening, and stuff. It is like the virtual advertising. So it's going to be interesting to see how that comes out afterward. Jeremy was asking before about esports, because esports was allowed to continue on, right? So that jersey there's my esports team. So they played League of Legends in the OPL. They missed 1 day of broadcast during this time. So normally they play in a studio. They played in the studio on the Friday. Then on the Saturday they said, no, we're not going to the studio anymore. They cancelled the day. By next Thursday, the whole competition was online. So they didn't lose any broadcast days, and were able to continue on, which helped with viewership, which helped with the conversations with brands who have had esports and gaming on their list but haven't got to it. And so it's accelerated those conversations, and I think there'll be brands getting into esports and gaming sooner because they've now starting to understand the space.
Yeah, it seems the situation has been a catalyst to some good things emerging, which is good, some good change. And I guess, Sean, it's a bit of a broad question for you, but how much do you think we'll see return to as it event experience?
All right, this is like Mad Libs, where we've got to fill in the gaps of Andrew's question. I'm going to do my best. So I think the question was about what's it going to be like when sports comes back, and how much are we going to be left with? That's the question I'm going to answer. So I think we're just going to be left with more choice. And I think the other thing is, back to Jeremy's point, there will be more broadcast innovation. So we will have more choice. They will shoot it differently. That idea of picking your angles and those kind of things would be different. And also, I think the use of new platforms will also be a thing. So just in the last 24 hours, Twitch now has a sports channel. Like you go to Twitch TV/Twitch Sports, and they didn't start small. Like Paris Saint-Germain, Arsenal, Real Madrid have now will be putting content on Twitch. Why will they be doing it? One, it's a new audience and an engaged audience of this younger demographic of people who follow games. So it's a way for them to interact with them. But it's also a different viewing experience where they're typing and chatting with their friends and having that conversation with the broadcast. So I think we'll see, like we're seeing with all the social networks where they steal stuff from others and bring it in, we will see more broadcasters go, well, that's actually working on Twitch. What does it look like if I'm on KO, or if I'm on Optus Sport, or if I'm on Channel 7? Like, more of the broadcasters will try to own more of that experience. So, as a lot of the rights and broadcast contracts are being renegotiated and reworked, it's going to be interesting to see where those digital rights and the broadcast options are going to land eventually. Whether they're going to land with the traditional old school media operators from your TV, or are they going to move toward more of these platform based? So that's the exciting bit for me, because all of that's been super accelerated because of COVID.
It seems a good takeaway, I think, for us as well. This cross-pollination of ideas or things that are working in a part of our industry. Can you use them in your world? I think it's a good sort of message to walk away with and think about. Jeremy, have you got further thoughts on that in terms of what Sean just spoke about in your space?
I do. There's probably a few I won't go into because they're active conversations. But yeah, I think Sean's he's certainly on the money. I think, and the reality is a lot of these conversations you need to think about their long term. Like if you're building a stadium, right? That's not cheap. You're not just pulling out your wallet and handing over a couple of $50 notes. You're talking, serious money, and with that comes some pretty long-term deals so that you can capitalize the money that you're spending and that you can have some surety and some certainty around that. And so what I mean by that is some of these deals are done, they're quite old. They're quite old contracts and quite old conversations. And it's exactly what Sean said, is people probably you didn't have to think about this sort of stuff when you were creating these contracts. And so there's new paths being paved, or there's new things to think about every time you're talking about how this works. I personally it's probably more in my personal life than my professional life, but I've tried to do it sort of across the board. I've tried to take the approach in this environment of doing the right thing, because at the moment in Australia, the reality is everybody's hurting a little bit. Some people are hurting us a lot, a significant amount, and a lot more than I am. So it's perhaps easy for me to say in this privileged position that our business is certainly feeling it like any other, but there's businesses that are feeling it a lot worse. But I have tried to take the approach of do the right thing. Do the right thing by everybody, and because we as a community, and I mean an Australian business community or a sports community or a community of sports professionals like us, is we all just need to do the right thing by each other, because everybody needs a bit of love and a bit of help and a bit of care at the moment. And so it's a slight digression from what you asked, Andy, probably because I'm probably not in a position where I want to go too deep into that. But ultimately, I think in a situation like this, everyone needs to do the right thing by each other, look out for each other, and try and, everyone needs to just try and say, we're all probably going to lose in this situation. How do we lose less, or how do we work together on this? And I don't mean that necessarily from a contractual point of view and finances, but what I'm saying is, how do we all learn from each other? How can we look outside our bubble of, what are we seeing in our industry? What are other industries doing well that we could learn from and leverage from? How do we partner up with businesses that have complementary skills? The idea of open teaming. So, bringing in complementary skill sets and working as a cross-functional team to solve a problem. Those sorts of things, I think, are, the way that we need to be thinking about some of these new challenges that are brought upon us that we haven't, we just didn't expect to have to deal with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great call out, Jeremy. I think it's a good mindset for us to all have at this time. And I just like to go to a question that Candice put out there, and it's for Andy, just around Everesting and the scope for creativity around the concept and evolving the concept. I know you touched on before how you've evolved there to the core concepts, and you have also, I think, offering run versions of Everesting and different elements as well. You got sort of comments in terms of Candice's question, how maybe even other cities could embrace the idea, and it can be.
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things about Everesting is the fact that you literally can do it anywhere in the world, and that includes in your own backyard. And even just 2 weeks ago, there was a group of Canadians who did quite literally that. They Everested on foot in their own backyard, up and down, and he sent me the photos showing how they literally wore a path into the grass on their yard doing that. And at the height of lockdown, there was quite a few people who were doing it on stairwells in their building, so literally climbing the height of one floor up and down some, God-foreseen amount of times, like 2,500 times or something like that. I think because it is such a really simple concept to grasp, and because the target that you're going for is Mount Everest, which is something that everybody on the planet knows of. That it's big and monumental, and it's kind of an easy concept for you to grasp. And I think that has, is intentionally part of the design, and that's been a big part of the reason why the concept has gained so much attention. If it was, a 9,000 meter challenge, that's meaningless to most people unless you're kind of really into climbing or anything. So I think having a really simple concept is really important. And in terms of the growth, like, the run side of Everesting has been something that we've sort of had because it's something that our community has asked for a couple of years ago. But really, that is the huge opportunity at the moment. And it is exploding into popularity. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that's quite appealing, because there's three pretty core existing groups of runners who this appeals to. There's an ultra runner set. There's a lot of people who look for 24-hour climbing records, and then on top of that, there's a huge community of stair climbers, which you mentioned, Candice, the Eureka Towers as an example. These guys and girls run up and down towers all around the world. There's a big federation and everything like that. So there's a couple of ways that we could that Everesting can very quickly tap into that and provide a bit of an umbrella goal for each three of those quite large segments to work towards. So yeah, it's exciting. It's fun how kind of flexible the concept is, and it really can embrace a lot of different elements.
Yeah, I love the mindsets and I guess the principles that each of you talked about today. And I think, you know, there's obviously no one answer for each of us in our work, but I think there's a lot of principles and thoughts that we can use in our specific, you know, context. And I guess a lot of our audience are obviously looking at how they set themselves up for future success within their current roles or as their roles start to re-emerge. So Sean and Jeremy, I'd love your perspectives in terms of the skills or even...
I'll start, Jeremy, and then you can figure out what the rest of it is. I mean, from my point of view, this is really a time to you know, better connect with different parts of the world. I mean, the beauty of Zoom is that previously, like, you know, Jeremy would have done the same. To go and meet someone in the US, you got to hop on a plane and go over and meet them. And so the world has become exceptionally, you know, much smaller. So, you know, connecting with people on LinkedIn and, you know, sharing what you're doing and what other people are doing, I think the opportunity to network is actually, you know, quite abundant. You know, we've been running sports business Zoom calls, getting different people joining the call, discussing different topics. And it's, you know, you don't feel isolated of, oh, this is just my problem, because there's other people in, you know, running major events that are trying to plan them out. There's people trying to run sports teams with limited staff. Everyone's working from home. So there is an opportunity to connect with everyone. And I think it's just going to, I guess, double down on, you know, this place I'm in, digital. And I agree with Jeremy, this idea of sport as an industry being redesigned, like we're going to see this, how is the world going to work? I think we will be, you know, leveraging freelance teams and you know, these teams that can move around and be adaptable will be leveraged more as the industry sort of resettles on what the new normal is, to, you know, to use all the phrases. But yeah, I think, you know, LinkedIn is still going gangbusters. It's still really a super active network, and even more active. And it's not just, you know, unfortunately for the people that have lost their jobs in this time, you know, you should be connecting with everyone in the space, because it's relatively collegial right now, and there's opportunities there to connect.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a unique industry, and people love the industry because of the people, and it's an industry that people want to support each other, care for each other, and help each other. And I think we need to be doing as much of that as we can. And I've seen some really awesome examples of that, but the more that we can do for each other, the better. I think from a skill set point of view, I think, you know, it's a really tough time in the sports industry at the moment. And I could see a lot of people sort of going, gee, I don't know how I'm going to get my break. It's more competitive than ever, and it's going to be really tough for me. But I think having a bit of internal reflection and being positive and backing yourself in, because because there is a lot of great skills amongst those people that may find themselves unfortunately out of a job or underemployed, if you like, not getting as much work as they like, because they're down at 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever it is. And I don't want to focus on that negative component. My point is, there is a great collection of skills, experience, and passion in this industry. And the passion is probably the one that is stronger than any other industry that I've worked in. And so I'd love to sort of, I'd love for people to be thinking about a way to leverage those skills and experience. Like, and I think LinkedIn is right, Sean, I completely agree with you, but does someone need to be thinking about an online, like a marketplace for all sports related skills, or is there a special way that we could do that or leverage it? Because I think there'll be plenty of freelance opportunities coming up, or casual work, etc., for businesses and sports that require a specific set of skills. So I think being really true and understanding what your value proposition is, and going hard to push that and leverage your networks, because and not just to get frustrated and walk away, because there is some great skills and experience in our industry. I don't know if that was quite answering the question, because we didn't quite get it all.
You're mute, Andrew. But the other point, are you there?
Yeah, I think they're both great perspectives. Thanks, guys. I think, you know, that's really valuable for our audience to hear. what advice from your vantage points that you can offer to people. So I think that's fantastic for people to understand and use and apply over the coming weeks and months. And I'll just come to you, Andy. You're coming sort of towards the end of the hour, just in terms of your sort of future priorities and really what's your intentions and next steps are in your work in the world of events.
Yeah, if we're talking about Everesting, then definitely the thing that I'm probably pushing hardest on is personalization. Obviously, that's something that the whole concept is built around the idea that you can take a challenge and make it so meaningful to yourself because you can completely personalize that experience. So, but it's sort of taking that and extending it and taking it a little bit further. So, for example, when you complete an Everesting, you earn the right to purchase a kit, which is fantastic. There's merchandise that's involved with that, and it's the only way you can get that is by completing that. But we work on a really exciting sort of industry first in terms of that, where we can hyper personalize that and individually tailor every single item to that athlete, including a whole bunch of relevant information from that Everesting that will work its way into the clothing that they purchase as part of that, and really sort of taking this idea that Everesting is something that is intensely personal, and you do that for a bunch of different reasons, whether it's for as an athletic achievement, or whether it's to raise funds or awareness for someone, or to it might be because you're overcoming adversity, or because it's a lifelong training goal for you. But then taking that idea of that personalized event experience and translating that into a product that you can put into your own hands. And then, as mentioned, the other thing that we're working pretty hard on is growing into different segments. So running, for example, is a huge opportunity for us at the moment, and it's something that we've been playing in for a little while, and we're just looking to expand that even further. Yeah,
fantastic. And more broadly, your role, CyclingTips, and future priorities for you guys and your work as events and membership across that community.
Yeah, so with CyclingTips, again, I kind of alluded to it before, but really it's taking a readership that we've had for many years and bringing them that little bit closer to us through a membership. And our membership really, like I said, recently, just this year, it feels like it's reached that tipping point where we have the scale and we have the interest level and probably the involvement from our members, where it really has become kind of the background hum to CyclingTips. It's a parallel set of conversations that are happening at the same time that people are consuming our media. And it's incredible how many, like a membership really does influence every single part of our business. When we're running physical events, it ties in beautifully there. When we're, creating content, we're creating it because of the support we get from our members, and specifically because of the feedback from our members directly. So it's exciting times for us, because that membership really is influencing the direction of future CyclingTips, and everything from the content we're creating through to the brands that we're working with, the stories that we're covering, the places we're sending journalists, etc. Exciting.
Yes. Andy, AVB, Tour de France this year is going to be a fairly different consumption model, and it's sort of a bit of a hybrid of esports and broadcast in terms of using Zwift. What do you think? How do you think that will go, and what do you think will change? So you just talked about personalisation. Do you think you'll see any in the way that people consume Tour de France? Do you think there'll be any benefits from it being in this format? Like, do you think people will try and ride the same segments as them, etc.? How do you think it'll change the way people consume it?
Yeah, so there's a virtual Tour de France that's running right at the moment, and then later on in the year will be the physical event that's been shifted. And who knows what that looks like, right, in terms of spectators and everything like that. But I think both you and Sean talked about it earlier, and really it's this idea of the way that you consume the Tour de France, I think, is changing as a result of what we're seeing this year. So as a consumer and end user, we're relying more on companion apps, and there's different outlets that are providing that, and it's providing different ways of kind of, like you were saying before, very traditionally it was two commentators, Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin, that would provide the commentary for the Tour de France for the last, whatever it is, 25 years or something like that. And you're watching the same feed wherever you are in the world, maybe translated into your local language. Whereas these days, there are so many companion apps, there's so many stats and conversations you can have with other fans of the sport at the same time while actually consuming that completely changes the experience from a end user's perspective. So I think that change has maybe been coming the last couple of years, but this year 100% through the E version of the Tour de France, you're going to see that really naturally explode when the Tour de France, the real thing happens later in the year.
I think it's, I'll stop asking questions because we're probably running out of time. I think it's really interesting because one thing that you do really well is storytelling, and you probably haven't touched on it too much today, but if anyone is interested in learning more about Everesting, I'm doing a plug for you here, ABB, but that video that you made when you and Matilda did your Everesting attempt actually on Mount Everest is one of the best examples of storytelling I've seen, and the emotion that comes with it. And if you've got it, I think it's 20 odd minutes, isn't it? So people might not have that much time, but it's a brilliant story that you can find on CyclingTips. But I think the one thing we probably haven't explored too much is the power of storytelling and telling the story about your event and the training you did for it and how you came across it. So we probably don't have time, Andy, but I think that's one other item that we probably shouldn't forget is the power of storytelling in that component.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, not to dwell on it, but that's the wonderful thing about having an open framework, that all of the people that are involved in this are contributing to that storytelling. So whether they've got a platform or not, those stories are being told, and if it's not being told by the individual with a significant reach themselves, and some of these videos reach into 500,000 views, it is being told by the brands that do have access to those networks.
We've got nothing but time because we're in lockdown. They took 45 minutes of Michael Jordan video, made it 6 hours. So, I think plenty. It's just a matter of there's still room for good storytelling for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Andrew seems to be locked out. I think the only other stuff is there, if we're going to wrap things up, is that you now have permission to throw out those big ideas. Because people are looking for different opportunities and different things to be able to do. And so where your boss may have said no previously, like now there should be more yeses, because they're looking for new avenues, new content, new ways to connect with fans and audiences and those kind of things. So, back to the point before, what should you be doing? Like I would be throwing those big crazy ideas at your brands, at your sponsors, at your NSOs, because we're in this world where, we can redesign work and the sports industry. So like that's to me, that's the exciting piece. Back to your point before, Jeremy, of it's not all doom and gloom. Like what is the exciting innovation going to come out of this? Because we're all going to be in this really compressed schedule and, different broadcasts and then we'll go, guess what? We've found this new piece of content, this new type of event, this new way to, connect with people, how we can extend our event. Like all of those things are going to come out of this. And so that's the bit that I'm focusing on because, I think there's plenty of upside there.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, fantastic thoughts you've shared with us today, and really appreciate your sharing your time. We're coming towards the end of our hour, but really do value your respective inputs, and thanks to everyone for tuning in again today. A few technical issues, but I'm sure we've taken a lot away that we can use in our work. So thank you, Sean, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Andy. All the very best for the coming weeks.
Thanks, Andy. Hey, it would be remiss of me not to say I'm very happy if I can help anyone. I'm very happy if anyone wants to reach out. I just talked about supporting each other and doing everything we can. So it would be remiss of me not to say if anyone does need a hand, if anyone wants to follow up on a conversation, or if I can help anyone, I'm very happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'm happy to lend a hand wherever I can. Per what I spoke about earlier, I'm sure the other boys are the same.
Yeah, exactly the same. I'm running these weekly Zoom calls that are general conversations, all on these topics. So if anyone wants to come to one, they're more than welcome. It's been really good having that global conversation on those types of topics.
I really thank you guys, and really encourage people to reach out. And obviously, I'm sure they want to explore some of the things that you've shared today and your various forums and initiatives. So thanks again, and we all hope you can join into the show next time.